The Shop 3 Sheep Eater. Written and read by W.P. Thrift, who can be contacted at Lantis Armstrong on Twitter. And cover art created by JD, contactable at Radix_L on Twitter. Chapter 12. The Race. Ray was up very early the following morning. Her night had been cursed with relentless spurts, intermixed with strange nightmares, which she quickly forgot upon waking. Staring up at the ceiling, she almost felt like she could recall them. Something about an island far, far away, where something lurked and hungered. The details didn't matter, though. What mattered was how out of place she felt now. She didn't belong here. Nobody wanted her to be here. Even her parents had stopped trying to communicate with her. She was a lost cause, and she knew it. What's worse, she agreed with everyone. Slipping on her jogging outfit, she decided to go for a run much earlier than usual today, mostly because she didn't want to be in this house when everyone started to wake up, and she planned to leave as soon as the sun came up. It was 4:30 a.m., so past the witching hour. It was safe for her to return home now, but she was going to give it an abundance of caution and try not to return to Cattailville until after the sun was fully out. The last thing she wanted was to die right now, slain by some monster in her hurry to return home. If her life was to end right now, not a soul on earth would attend her funeral, and that was just depressing for her to think about. Maybe if she could live another few years, she would have made some new friends, and then, fingers crossed, die before they realized how repugnant her personality was. Of course, there were a great many people who did still care about her, that she was forgetting. But depression and self-loathing tend to give one a negative selection bias. Leaving the house, she stood out in the driveway doing stretches. Just one quick casual jog around the usual path, and it should be close enough to sunup that she could just drive off and arrive in Cattailville right as the sun crested the horizon. The usual path being all the way down the driveway, lapping around the entire property along the inside of the fence, and then returning here. Ray had clocked it all in at about 10 kilometers on the dot, or 6 miles for the metric illiterate. 36 minutes to make the lap would mean that she would be running about 10 miles an hour. She may make 2 laps just to kill slightly over 1 hour, which for her was a very casual pace and distance. It had been years since her parents had tried to whip her into shape, but she never lost what she had gained from that. But while they purported to be training her to be like them, they only ever focused on her ability to run. So is that the hidden message in her training? They wanted Ray to just be able to run away her whole life? Well, they were about to get their wish, because after this literal run, she was about to be symbolically running in her truck back home. Then again, that was a very pessimistic view of her training. Maybe they just wanted to make sure their little girl could always run away from danger. That was funny, because she always used her truck for that, too. Or the numerous rifles she had mounted in the back of her cab. It's like there was no real reason for you to ever put me through any of that bullshit at all, huh, Mom and Dad? Ray thought snidely. Oi! Someone called loudly from the porch. She hadn't heard anyone leaving the house, so she jumped and let out an involuntary scream before turning around, wide-eyed. Her eyes dropped to anger when she saw who it was. Lantis, already in his workout uniform. She had forgotten just how early he woke up to do his training these days. That seemed so very strange to her now, because, come to think of it, that meant he had gotten, 3 hours of sleep? His workout routine was somewhat built into her jogging routine, in a way. She had left to jog a few hours after sunrise, normally, so that she could lap him several times while he and Haley were out doing their fence inspections for the day. He always finished his workout so fast that he'd get started on his chores well before most people would be sitting down for breakfast. Here to yell at me again? For trying to force you to stop killing yourself? Ray asked, foot in her hand as she continued to stretch her thigh. Nah, he replied. After thinking about it, I realize those cigs are probably old and stale by now. They would have tasted terrible and done nothing for me. That was not the most reassuring of answers. Well, you have fun with your workout then, Ray said. She didn't want to fight with him. She just wanted to go. She wished seeing him would have pissed her off more, but it just didn't. It only served to remind her why she'd come here in the first place. It made her feel worse about being about to leave. Going for a jog? I'll join you, Lanta said, running over to her just as she began to jog off. He didn't bother stretching as he had been told by Mr. March. That was probably just a myth. It's actually better for people to stretch before sitting down for long periods of time than it was to stretch before exercising. You'll just slow me down. I have a schedule to keep to, Ray dismissed, speeding up slightly to try and lose him. To her surprise, he kept pace with her. Ah, no way. I've seen you jog. You're not that fast, Lanta said. Ray frowned. You haven't seen me sprint. I'm a distant sprinter. I could leave you in the dust if I wanted. Maybe on the road, but there's too much grass around the fence to kick up dust, Lantis replied. Okay, smartass. You want a race? Ray shot back. Yes, Lantis replied immediately. Fine. Ray took a long, deep breath, then tilted forward before exhaling and bolting down the road, kicking up a sandstorm of dust in her wake. Her speed was truly superhuman. The results of her parents' training always resulted in such, if the trainee didn't die. Olympic medalists could eat their hearts out as she cracked 30 miles an hour, her arms jolting back and forth in rapid chopping motions as she ran, frantically creating whip-like cracks. At the moment they changed directions and broke the sound barrier. She looked back, and he was long gone, as she suspected would happen. She sharply turned the corner and at the very end of the driveway began running down the path next to the fence. And a split second later, Lantis emerged from the dust, his face red, teeth showing as the skin on his face pulled back into what looked like a wide sneer. He hadn't been trained for this kind of speed at all, and it was killing him, but he pushed on, determined to catch her. A slight gasp of surprise escaped her lips when she first saw him emerge, hot on her heels, but then a smile crossed her face. She couldn't believe it. She had never had a genuine competitor in a race before. Not ever. Her parents could likely overtake her, but they had never humored her with a race. They just weren't interested, no matter how much she had begged them when she was younger. The one time she had shown any interest in the results of her training, the one thing they could have connected on, and they just dismissed it as a flight of fancy. Racing? Ha! If you want a challenge, race somebody in a car! She recalled her father saying that so well, mostly because of the fit she had pitched right afterwards, that he wasn't taking her seriously. Having fun? Ray dropped her speed just a bit so that Lantis could finally catch up. She could swear that she could hear his heart pounding in his chest, while hers still felt like it was almost at rest. Yes! Lantis cried out, the strain making his words sound insincere. Funny to hear you say that. Here I thought you hated me too much for us to ever enjoy a slow, brisk jog together, Ray said, meaning for her words to be insulting. What? Lantis somehow managed to show genuine surprise through his still reddened skin. I don't hate you at all. In fact, I really like you. A lot. Ray nearly stumbled, and Lantis overtook her. Was that his game? To trip her up and pull ahead? He had said it so casually, without a hint of hesitation as one might expect to hear from someone confessing having strong feelings for another. Or did he simply mean liking her a lot as a friend? Great. Another thing that Ray would end up overanalyzing to death. She picked up her speed to overtake him again, calling back, Enough lollygagging. The real race starts now. It was out of sheer curiosity that Ray pressed herself as hard as she could go. She hadn't done this in a long time, never any reason for it. She could maintain her inhuman speed without pushing herself, so long as she kept up regular running regimens. But today she had felt the urge to push herself. Whether it was to embarrass Lantis or to show off to him, she couldn't say. She was good at estimating her speed up to about 30 miles an hour, but after that she had never clocked herself, so she didn't know what the speed milestones after that felt like. How fast she was going was anyone's guess, but it was fast, fence posts whizzing by in a blur that became so rapid it began to look like they were flowing backwards, away from her, just an optical illusion caused by speed. Her heart finally began to speed up. Her breathing gradually grew heavy. A weird twitching started on the left side of her nose for some reason. A very weird sensation she couldn't recall having before, and had no idea what was doing it. Glancing back was dangerous at this point. She felt like she had less control of her body, as every time her foot left the ground, a great deal of distance was traveled before the next foot touched down, even if it was near instant motions. But she risked glancing back, and for a heart-stopping moment, she thought that Lantis was actually going to catch her again. He held up his hands in a victory pose when he saw her looking at him. Then he face-planted, hard, and skid quite a ways before stopping. Ray sunk her heels into the ground and tore a deep gash through it to stop herself. Then she rushed back over to him. Before she even got there, he bounced back up again to his feet, panting heavily, with much dirt and grass stuck to his face, covering up the numerous scrapes he had suffered. "I'm good. Let's keep going," Lantis said energetically, even though his breathing was heavy, and he was holding his left arm, which trembled. As much as she was enjoying the challenge, she worried that she was going to make Lantis kill himself if he kept this up. For his sake, she wanted to call off the race. "Look, this race is stupid," she began. "Only for a loser," Lantis declared, interrupting her. "Let's go!" Ray wanted to press that they needed to stop, but she cracked a smile instead. Did he love racing, or did he just love a challenge? Either way, she could respect his attitude. "Okay, just so you know, I'm no loser, so I'm not going to let you win out of pity," Ray said. "So when I win, we'll both know that it was fair and square," Lantis taunted playfully. "Ha! It is on!" Ray bolted back away from him, and after several stumbling steps, Lantis managed to recompose himself and pressed on as well. His speed was greatly diminished now. He had peaked, and couldn't seem to start catching back up again. She didn't know it, but his legs were screaming at him to stop with every stride he took. Her legs, contrarily, hadn't felt so good in a long time. They were actually warming up. How long it had been since she had found an excuse to push herself this hard. A very long time, indeed. She did end up slowing up enough that Lantis wouldn't nearly kill himself again, but took the final stretch down the driveway, back to the front porch of the house as fast as possible, just so she'd have time to perfect the perfect cocky stance before he got there. She opted for sitting on the steps, head in one hand, and the other hand tapping on her knee, a smug expression firmly planted on her face. Lantis arrived, slowed to a halt, went to say something, then collapsed flat on his face. Suddenly concerned, she jumped up and rushed over to him. He then pulled one leg up under his body and was back up and sprinting before she realized it. He bolted past her and tagged the front door. "Victory!" Lantis called out. "Oh, not even!" Ray was shocked. "Let me have this!" Lantis begged. "Oh, forget it! Rematch?" "How much do you love losing?" Ray quizzed. "I have more stamina than you. I can keep this up all day." Lantis lied. He was about to pass out. "That wasn't even a warm-up for me," Ray boasted. "So, rematch?" Lantis asked again. "Fine. Set. Go!" Ray turned and bolted as Lantis yelled that he wasn't ready yet, but then bolted forward, smacking his head on a low-hanging flower pot hanging off the front porch. He then recollected his senses and bolted after her again, breathing heavily. Ray slowed up gradually as he was within shouting distance. "You realize you don't stand a chance, right? If I have to do this 100 times, I'll beat you!" Ray felt her heart speeding up, but not from the running. She truly loved someone with that level of determination. What had even brought that out of him? Had he been like this all along, but was just too weak to do anything about it? She cringed at the thought of him being too weak before. Her parents got a hold of him, She never wanted to have anything to be thankful for when they were involved, but the results were speaking for themselves. It was hard for her to ignore. Oh, wait, she thought, figuring out a way to ignore it. It wasn't them. It was just him. He's the one that put in the time and the effort, the one that never gave up, no matter how hard their training was. My heart's going to explode! Lantis exclaimed, clutching his chest with one hand and the other, blurred through the air, back and forth in an L shape, pumping fast as a jackhammer as he sprinted at superhuman speeds. We can stop, you know. Take 5? Ray called back with concern. Huh? No! No! Lantis said quickly. I was just thinking out loud. Ignore me! I'm winning this race! His breathing was turning raspy. So much so, even Ray could hear it from many yards ahead of him, and with the wind whistling loud in her ears. I bet he regrets every cigarette he ever smoked now, huh? Ray thought, feeling a bit smug about being right before. Suddenly, like lightning, something sprung out from the nearby peach trees and tackled Lantis hard against the fence, which bowed out instantly, tearing up several fence posts with it. There you are, whippersnapper! Mr. March declared, mounted up on Lantis's chest after pinning him to the ground. Dad! Ray yelled, skidding to a stop before turning and running over to him, and Lantis at a more normal speed. What the hell did you do that for? This youngin's missing out on his early morning practice is what? Mr. March said. Only now did Ray realize. The sun was up in the sky. They had been racing each other clear through the morning. Practice? Lantis said, confused and dazed from being slammed down so hard. Wait, no! I'm too tired for that right now! Mr. March, please, not today! Yes, today, whippersnapper! Mr. March declared. Do you think your enemies will cut you some slack just because you're tired? No way! You must learn to push through your exhaustion. I'd rather not, Lantis protested, but Mr. March had already begun dragging him away by the arm. He forced himself back up to his feet and turned to give an embarrassed wave of goodbye to Ray. Sorry I couldn't finish the race. The old man kidnapped me. She wanted to say it was fine, but was simply lost for words right now. Instead, she merely waved goodbye in return. The run had been both brutal and cathartic on her. She couldn't even find the strength to get mad at her dad for his interruption. Part of her was glad that that had happened. She had genuinely started to become worried that Lantis would run himself to death trying to beat her. But at the same time, her own legs, or even the rest of her body for that matter, were starting to stitch up on her. She had begun to push herself too far without even realizing it. She ventured directly through the peach trees back to the house, where she took only a moment to glance over at her beat-up red truck parked along the side of the house, right next to Cassidy's much nicer, newer truck. She didn't feel like leaving anymore. She just went back to her room to grab a change of clothes before heading to the shower. She was thinking that she was completely emotionally exhausted before looking at herself in the bathroom mirror. But what she saw there blew her mind. The face staring back at her was grinning from ear to ear. That concludes Chapter 12 of Sheep Eater. Tune in every Tuesday for new chapters, and please subscribe to be notified the moment they're released. If you would like to reach me, you can do so at Lantis Armstrong on Twitter. That's LANTISARMSTRONG. Thank you for tuning in, and we hope you'll join us again for next week's chapter. Bowman comes to supper.